Good afternoon, everyone. So what I like to do is to share what we learned in the last 2 years with deploying an artificial intelligence assistant to about 20,000 colleagues across the Prosus group. And I'll focus on the way this assistant has changed, the way we work, and what are the results in terms of productivity, change of work, and the statistics that we have learned in that process. Some of you will know Prosus. For those that don't, by the way, I don't see the monitor here with my slides. I'm not sure if you can change that. Thank you. We are a global consumer technology group, so we work in consumer platforms. We serve about 2 billion consumers globally for anything which is daily needs, food delivery platforms, grocery, and so on, to decisions that people take once in a while, buying a house, changing jobs, buying a car, and so on, and everything in between, right? So second-hand goods, new goods, and so on. We operate about 100 e-commerce companies globally, and because of the nature of our business, billions and billions of transactions, we use artificial intelligence everywhere, machine learning or artificial intelligence, however you like it. Right? So we started this journey in 2018. That's when we really started investing heavily on artificial intelligence. One of the first things that we did, and is one still at this point in time, one of the most successful initiatives, we decided to start a big upskilling for the entire company. So we said, if we want to become proficient in AI, we need to upskill everybody, from the C-level to the engineer that just started in the organization. When I say everybody, I mean everybody. It's 25,000 people. That program started there, is continuing, and is the program that probably had the biggest impact on what we get for AI. Back in 2019, we also came to terms with the fact that many of the use cases that we couldn't really solve before, and that have to do with language, every type of information that has to do with language, customer support, and everything else, we didn't really have good tools at that time with traditional machine learning, but then transformers were sufficiently good to start working with that. So we got convinced it made sense to invest in transformers, so we started a collaboration with OpenAI. I think it was pre-GPT-3, so it's a very long time ago. And fast forward, in 2022, we released Tokan, which is the name of our artificial intelligence assistant, across the group. So at this moment, we have about 1,000 AI specialists that work across Prosus. When we started in 2018, it was 60, right? So that's the level of growth that we had. It's 700 models in production. I don't really know exactly the number, but you're talking about something like this. But majority of them are machine learning models. So recommendation, fraud prediction, logistics optimization, price optimization, the things that you expect to happen. We measure impact continuously. It's hundreds of millions of cost savings or growth. And in particular, it has become the engine of our growth. We have companies that grow very fast in the group, and in particular, that growth is predicated on AI. So I'm totally convinced about that. Here are a few examples. OLX is our classified platforms. They operate predominantly in Europe, and they use artificial intelligence to predict the effectiveness of marketing campaign before you spend the money in marketing. So they have 10 marketing campaigns, you predict the impact, and then you actually run the one that has the biggest impact. Because of that, they get 20% more for every dollar spent. $1 gives you 20% more, and this is, by the way, all data in annual terms. iFood saves hundreds of millions, I think around 150 million costs per year with AI. It's a food delivery company. It's the largest and the fastest growth delivery company in Brazil. And they automate everything from the moment you open the app to select what you want to the moment it's delivered to you, and everything in between. So massive savings. Meesho is an e-commerce platform in India. They provide automated customer support to 90% of their customers. So significant. And I'll focus on this one here. I'll focus now on the 20 colleagues that use Tokan, our AI assistant. So first of all, what is Tokan is, it works like an assistant, so think of it like ChatGPT plus Copilot plus Notebook LM, right? But dedicated to the use cases for our company and connected to all the data sources inside of our organizations, right? We released that in 2022 summer, so it was several months before ChatGPT. But at that time, we're convinced that in any case, it was a good idea. I'll come in a second why we did that. It's a personal assistant. I said lives on Slack because most of our employees work on Slack, but it can also operate on the web browser. And it can do things like this. So it can code, it can answer questions, it does data analysis. You go to database and you can interrogate the database in English. Image generation, it handles documents and compare documents for lawyers, web search, all this kind of thing, right? So the things that you expect from an analyst. And it's really advanced because it uses about 20 models from everything from OpenAI to Anthropic to Gemini and so on, plus the open source, and a variety of tools because it is agent-based, right? So it is based on architecture of agents. And I'll come to that in a second. But first of all, why did we build an assistant? Because at that time in summer 22, we knew that ChatGPT was coming out, right? So why do we bother? For several reasons. This is actually our sequence of thoughts and decisions we made over time. So we started exploring Gen AI in 19, and we got convinced it could solve a variety of use cases. Therefore, we invest more. During the pandemics, we had something like 20, 25 field tests. So we gave a prototype of this assistant to something like 10 companies, I think, across the group, and asked them just play around, find out what can you do with this. And what came back was a bunch of things that we expected. People use it for coding, that's great, and many, many things that we did not expect. So we were surprised by perhaps half of the use cases we didn't really imagine, so we came to the conclusion that we can't imagine. So what's the best way to discover how this can help is to give this to everybody. A process of collective discovery. The best way to innovate when things change so fast is to tinker with the tools. So give everybody as many technologies you can so that they can figure out themselves and we all together learn. Of course, that is the opposite choice that many companies have done in that period of time. But we said with the right guardrails, this is the right approach. So we put guardrails. We control the technology end to end, so you cannot train any model with interactions. It's not used for anything else. We provided a lot of education to make sure that people know how to use it. And then, of course, there are many other benefits. But anyway, so this is our, let's say, thinking process. It is designed as a tool for collective discovery as our way to figure out how this could work. Let's start in summer 2022, and the first 6 months, 8 months, so this is how people used it. So they are at that point, I think it's about some 1,000 users. At this moment, there are about 24,000 users, of which I think 12 or 13, they use it every day, right? 12 or 13,000 used every day. That time it was close to 1,000, something like this. And because of the nature of our business, so half of our employees are engineers, so you expect that half of the usage is engineering. And in fact, that's what you see. Software engineering, automation and coding and SQL and data were about 50% of the tasks, and 52% are non-engineering tasks. How do we get these numbers? In 2 ways. By talking to people, so we have panels of people that work with us, and by training a statistician, which is another model designed just to run the statistics. So we don't see what people say when they talk, but there is a model that creates tagging and statistics and aggregates all this such a way that we can have evidence. So in fact, we create an enormous amount of insights, what people need, what they want, and so on. So that's the initial usage. And then there are many things that you can expect here. Software engineering is in particular bug fixing. There's a lot of unit testing. There's a lot of explaining why does this work in the way that it works, right? The other area where we see continuous usage is this, writing and communication. That part does not change over time. It's always about 20%, something like this, 15, 20%. There is a continuous need of people to figure out how to communicate properly, how to ask forgiveness, right? How to ask for something being polite, right? How to improve this document, and so on and so on and so on. That remains in spite of the fact that these tools are diffused everywhere. So that's the initial usage. About 25% of the interactions had a negative feedback. at that time, right? So we had 3 icons. Whenever you touch the tool, you have 3 icons: thumbs up, thumbs down, heart, I love it, and Pinocchio. Pinocchio is to indicate you made it all up, right? You're lying, right? So at that time, we had something like 20-25% of thumbs down and about 10% Pinocchios. So it means you can't really use it for anything which is mission critical, operational, and so on. So we kept tracking the reasons for these Pinocchios and so on, and we came to the conclusion many use cases that people want to execute cannot be executed by LLMs. It just can't be done, so you need something else. That's where we started introducing agents, right? So an architecture that doesn't take a question, gives you an answer to a model, but actually breaks it down in pieces and uses tools to give you an answer. So that was, give or take, second part of last year. So this is how agents work in an oversimplified way, but I think it's still useful. This is the question: what's the percentage of food orders in Berlin that were delivered in 25 minutes or less last week? Make a diagram for last month. Great. There's no LLM that can do that. You can connect it with all the things you want. You can rag the word. It will not work. So this is what an agent does. It disambiguates the request. It creates plans, decides which tools to use. That means some of the tools it might be browsing, the other write code, the third one write a document. It chooses the data in the database connected. It writes the SQL, runs and checks the results and reflects. And if it finds an error, redoes the thing, right, until it's satisfied. And at the end, it creates the response. Initially, this worked 80% of the times. So again, better than nothing, but still not good enough. So to go 98%, we spent a lot of time on the SQL part and was the wrong place where to go. Writing SQL from English is trivial at this moment, right? It disambiguating the request and figuring out what's the plan is where everything fails. So we had to train models for doing that. What does it mean, disambiguate the thing? When I say Berlin, what is it? The city center? Is it within the highway? Is it the municipality? When I say last week, what is last 7 days? Last Monday to Sunday, trivial stuff like that. Every human knows that, every analyst knows that, the machine doesn't know, right? So you have to train models to make sure that the first part works. If you get there, you get about 98% accuracy. What do we get out of all this? The current users has changed, so the engineering tasks have diminished, and the non-engineering has increased. We have now about 24 companies using the assistant. They create about 500,000 requests every month. And of these 20,000 users, about 12,000, 13,000 use it every day. You can see the distribution now between engineering and non-engineering. What's the impact? Our naive way early on was that, listen, this is going to automate something. And it happened, but essentially only for customer support. So the only area where we can see obvious, possible automation is customer support, and that everybody can do that if you want. Then the other thing that we have seen, a continuous stream of micro productivity bursts everywhere, right? Because people use it everywhere and so on. And once people get used to the tool, they figure out how it works, how it doesn't. You have clusters of use cases, and I gave you the example of the data analyst, when people get superpowers. That means that they can really understand how to change the way they work and to get a lot more efficient. So let's look at two things. First, what we get in terms of workflow augmentation, when we get in terms of superpowers. So this is a complicated slide, but in fact, it is what we use to measure how much time we save every day. Saving time is just one of the things that we care about. If you look at people, this is not the main one they care about. Saving time is great, but using the assistant, they get more senior. So it's like being able to do much more than you normally do without asking a colleague. So you can consider these assistants, at least the way that we look at them, as a seniority boost for the entire organization. The third thing they say all the time, it gives me freedom. I've got more independence. All right, so all these things are very important, but let's focus on time here. For the active users, it saves about 1 hour per day. It's actually a bit less than 1 hour, but let's say 1 hour. Here you can see the tasks that people do. You can see the frequency. I think this is a sample, but in any case, it's a good representation of the frequency. And these arrows down is how many minutes they save per task. And then it depends on whether it's an advanced, intermediate, or basic task. So it changes all the time. We train a model to calculate all this based on a number of interviews and data from humans, right? So we create a training set and so on. We include in also the time that the models, the tools can waste, right? Because sometimes you ask something, you get what the result is not what you want. You're wasting my time, right? So in 15% is wasting time. The other 85% is gaining time. Altogether, it's about 1 hour per day of time that you free up. We don't care about saving personal costs. Here, what we really care about is enabling growth in our companies without coupling the growth of costs, right? So decoupling growth and costs. So the only thing we care about is that phenomenon. Then with agents, something gets even more interesting. So it's a sample, in this case, from iFood. And by the way, the guys of iFood are here, so if you want to ask them, they are right here, right? The guys that have co-developed this. So this data analyst gives access to data to everyone in English or Portuguese or whatever language you have, right? So you don't need dashboards anymore. You go through Slack, your databases are connected, you ask what you want there. So what we have seen is that for some use cases in logistics, it can automate 21% of the requests. It means that the analysts that normally are the gatekeeper of this information get 21% less requests, so it can work on more complicated things, right? But the other thing is also important here is that before this automation, you have this level of requests that are addressed, and with the tool, there are much more. What does it mean? It means that a number of data asks that were coming to the analyst, they could not be addressed quickly enough. They became backlog, right? And now they can be addressed independently by the users. So we save about 200 analyst days per month, and the time to insight goes down to almost 75%. These are material things. It means that you make an organization different. It is really changing. You might be interested in costs, how much this whole thing costs. These are just 4 months, but because of data analysis picking up so fast, it has an impact. So the number of questions is the blue line. It has doubled in 4 months, so it means May to August. The tokens per question is the red line, went up faster. Agents consume many more tokens than the normal tools, right? Because they need to iterate. They make many calls to the various LLMs, right? At the same time, the cost per token goes down. It's about half now what it was in May, right? You expect that to go down and so on. It's the same dynamics you had in mobile phones, right? The features go up, the costs go down, they cost the same, right? So what we see now is that on average, the cost of a request does not change, which is about 25 cents per request. So every time we touch the tool, it costs 25 cents. So the average cost is a little bit increased. So since users use it a lot more, the monthly average user cost has gone up quite a lot, right? So this is an expensive tool, but it's super powerful. We estimate it might cost $12 to $13 per user, right, for every user. One thing that I want to underline here is how we understand all this usage, and then coming back to the wealth of information that we are capturing while keeping privacy in every situation. So this model that we train to understand, let's say the interaction is called flow, and flow can do many things. One of the things it does, it figures out why do you use the tool? What is it the real intent? So you ask me this one, what do you try to do? Is it learning? It's solving a bug, right? It's self-facilitating something. It tells us what else could I use if I don't use this tool? So if I didn't test this tool, how could I solve this problem? And so on and so on and so on and so on. This is a phenomenal piece of information that we have that help us understand what to do next. So it's incredible. If you want to know more about what we do, there's a podcast we just released, From Data to Dollars. You can take a look at our, let's say, the way that we have developed AI in the last few years. And there is an online conference that you might be interested in. It's Agents in Production. It's going to be 13th of November. It's the best startups globally. Okay, we gather them, and they are going to share what they do in building agents and bringing those agents in production. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Are you taking any questions?
If there is time,
Yeah?
sure, but I'm not sure.
Anybody has any questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. May I know which framework did you use to develop your agents?
We developed it.
Your own?
Yeah.
Okay.
We use open source, but the core is developed in-house. Yeah.
You told us a bit about how you basically get all your employees on board. What would be your most mission-critical step in that one? So how would you advise any corporate that embarks on this AI implementation journey?
Well, listen, I think what worked for us, right? What worked for us is education, that's the first thing. And second, give people tools and then educate on these tools. I mean, there is no, the amount of time we spend with education, workshops, hackathons, and all this kind of thing, just to make sure that everybody knows exactly what works, what doesn't, it's enormous, right? But I don't think you can do it without that. So education, give them tools, and continue to educate. Per month. I wish. You could that with, if you use open source, you could reduce that significantly, but at this point in time, you also compromise on quality. So I'm not sure if it is going to go down. My suspicion, my take is that probably is going to hover around that in terms of cost and maybe, let's say, decrease a bit, but it's not going to go down to 30 cents per user per month. That will never happen.
Yeah, thank you for the great presentation.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so my question is, apart from the educating your employing and kind of, you know, pushing them into using the AI assistant, what other methods are you using? Because like from our experience, we have built an SQL assistant and people using SQL just saying, okay, I'll just write my code myself. I don't need an assistant. So I'm smart enough to write the code myself. So how do you overcome this bias, this, you know, kind of rigidity in the mindset? Thank you.
Well, listen, in our context, first of all, it has to work very well. If that is not the case, there's just nothing you can do about it. That's one thing. But in our context, the analysts are so overloaded with work, they can't wait to get something that does it for them, right? So it is not that, let's say that if they have this tool doing something for them, they're just going to be sit there. There's a real need to offload the things that others can do and focus on the things that help growth, right? So for us, it has not been a very big convincing. Of course, I mean, some people say, well, I do it better, but it doesn't matter. On average, this is what we see.
Hi. How did you manage Pinocchio answers? Because the Pinocchio answers made your employees call wrong decisions. And how did you afford this?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat for me, please.
Okay. You told about the Pinocchio options. Happy, unhappy, and Pinocchio. How did you manage the cause of the Pinocchio answers or
right.
results?
That's great. So when we see, so it's fine, I got 10% Pinocchios. Well, the first thing that you can go back, you have all the statistics, you find out where do they happen. And a lot of these Pinocchios happen in data analysis, right? Data analysis, if you want to create a poem, doesn't matter, you know, fine, that millions of poems are okay. You want to summarize a text, 1,000 versions that are fine. If you want a number, it has to be that number, right? That's it. So a lot of people were getting answers to questions that require a precise, correct answer, and it was not there. So they get mad at us, right? So we don't use the tool. So, but we could see that because Flow, which means the statistician, the model that does the statistic, could tell us that that was the case. So we go in that direction. It took about 1 year to get there, though, right? But that's one of the key reasons. Of course, we talk to people and find out day after day what they want, what they don't like.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your session.
Thank you.